We are covering this story for you from Beirut, Washington, D.C., Amman, here in Doha. But first, we're going to take you to Tehran and our correspondent, Mohammed Val. Mohammed, if Iranian officials say no one is asking for a ceasefire and no one is offering negotiations, what are they saying about this conflict continuing in the longer term?
Well, Riley, they are saying that Iran has what it takes to continue this fight. And you have seen them talking today about using that Sigil hypersonic missile, which is 15 times the speed of sound for the first time. It's a message that after more than 2 weeks into this war, they are now showing new missiles for the first time and using them against targets in Israel and elsewhere. So that in itself is a message of defiance and also of what they have been saying, capability to continue. That's the only thing on which the Iranians are betting. They're not talking about negotiations. They don't have trust in the other side. They are relying on military might and on the resolve of the people and the armed forces. This is the gist of the message here. The foreign minister actually has also spoken elsewhere about this war being imposed on Iran and also on the United States, hinting there that the primary beneficiary of this war is Israel, and that there was bad advice that has been given to President Trump that caused him to catapult the United States armed forces into this war, which is not beneficial for the United States. Talks also about the Strait of Hormuz and talked about the smart control Iran has now on the strait. It's not completely closed. It's only closed to the ships and tankers that belong to the enemy, or the forces or the entities that are allied to the enemy, but not to other ships. So, I mean, this is another narrative, the counter-narrative of the Iranians regarding the Strait of Hormuz and regarding that American call to other parties and other countries to join with warships. So Iranians are saying there is no need for that. There is need only to stop cooperating with the United States and Israel in this regard. The IRGC and the armed forces also are announcing wave after wave of strikes against targets across the region. The last, they call it the True Promise number 4. The last is number 54, in which that Sigil missile has been used for the first time. They are also issuing warnings to people to evacuate areas that are around or close to the places where the American troops live within the Gulf region. Some of that has been, they talked about places in different countries in the Gulf region and asked civilians to stay away from those locations because definitely they are going to strike against them. They're talking about the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier in the Red Sea, saying that that aircraft carrier presents a threat to Iran, to the security of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and that ground facilities in the region that are providing logistics support to the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier are also going to be targeted. So, I mean, both the military and the political narrative here in Iran is one of defiance and continuation. Nothing about negotiations or about going to talks. We understand that the president here in Iran and also the prime minister have talked to their French counterparts today. We don't know what they talked about, but we understand that France has been mentioned just a couple of days ago as one of the countries that approached Iran for the possibility of potential negotiations. Today there have been renewed contacts between Iranian leaders and the French leaders. The hope among people here is that probably there will be something about a way out of this war.
Mohammed, I want you to stay with us while we bring in Manuel Rapallo, who is live from Washington, D.C., because, Manuel, Mohammed was talking about the Iranian foreign minister indicating that Iran is ready to go on with this war as long as it takes. But he wasn't just saying that. He was saying it on U.S. airwaves today. So I wonder what that means for the White House's timeline on this war and for their narrative at home.
Riley, what the Iranian foreign minister is signaling here on American media, as you mentioned, is undermining the U.S. narrative from the White House, which seems to be the White House is struggling here to control this narrative of a short and decisive conflict. Now, on Sunday, we heard from White House advisor Kevin Hassett, who repeated many of President Trump's claims that that this war is ahead of schedule, that the conflict could be over within 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of chatter here in Washington, given the fact that it is Sunday, and a lot of pundits and military experts speaking on the Sunday morning talk shows. But again, here, what others in Washington are reading between the lines is that Iran is preparing here or shifting strategies into a war of attrition, doubling down. This is an existential threat for Iran. So they're shifting into a strategy of endurance to drag this conflict out. And if the White House loses control over this narrative, over this framing of this being a short and decisive military campaign, then perhaps Washington diplomats could be forced into a scenario where they'll have no other choice but to return to the negotiating table and find a diplomatic off-ramp for this conflict.
And that might be just what Iran is looking for. Manuel Rapallo, thank you. Let's go back to Mohammed Val, who is in Tehran for us. So there is this continued bombardment still, though, Mohammed, that is happening across Iran. And I wonder if you can tell us if you know any of the targets that were hit today and also how people in Iran are dealing with this continued bombardment.
Yes, Riley, we can talk about general places, but we can't talk about specific targets because, on the one hand, the government here is not providing information about that. And on the other hand, media and people are also restricted and they're not given the ability to access places and take pictures. And also there is this blackout on the international internet connections in the country. But we know generally that there have been strikes today on Hamadan, and that caused the death of 9 people there. And also 6 people died in renewed strikes on Isfahan. The Tabriz also has been mentioned, Kasham and Kermanshah. So lots of cities today have been bombarded as usual. Tehran, not much during the day in Tehran, except for listening or hearing of the air defense systems activated just a couple hours ago. We don't know why. We didn't see anything in the air. But Tehran has always been a hotspot in this war. And understandably, there might be strikes overnight as the Israelis are promising to really concentrate on Tehran because of the many facilities, military and otherwise, around it. And the Israelis promising to obliterate all of those institutions and facilities related to Basij, the armed forces, and also to the IRGC. The IRGC has announced the 54th wave, as I said, and they talked about so far launching more than 700 missiles on targets in Israel and the region, and also 3,600 drones have so far been also launched on the enemy in the region, as they say. So there is no let up in the war and no let up in the bombardment on Iran, and that's basically what's going on right now.
Manuel, back to you in Washington. With over half of American voters now opposing this war, what pressure is the White House facing domestically, and how are people feeling it at this point? We've been hearing people talk about gas prices rising, cost of goods rising. Is any of that happening dramatically in the U.S. yet?
All of these are factors that the American people are paying very close attention to. And these poll numbers are representing a significant challenge for the Trump administration. Yes, attitudes here in the United States when it comes to U.S. military intervention in Iran tend to be split along partisan lines, but there's many factors, as you just mentioned, Riley, here that are being taken into account in the United States that are impacting public opinion. There's the pushback from Congress. We can expect over the course of this week to be hearing more push for more briefings on Capitol Hill from the administration, more oversight. There's a likelihood of seeing a renewed debate over war powers resolutions here. And there are key concerns from the American public over fuel prices. We can point to a poll by the Associated Press from last week that shows that 2/3 of Americans expect fuel prices to worsen as the year goes on. And if we want to look at this in historical terms, you can point to nothing being quite as impacting on public support than rising fuel prices, at least here in the United States, in a country that really loves their cars quite a bit. There's also growing anxiety here in the U.S. over the potential of retaliation by Iran on U.S. soil. There's a Quinnipiac poll from last week that shows that 77% of Americans believe that a terror attack could happen on U.S. soil, saying that that is likely as a direct response of this conflict. So between public opinion, the pushback from Congress, the economic and political pressure here, the Trump administration is under a tremendous amount of pressure from Congress, from the American people, to reassure everyone that the administration, that the White House has this situation under control.
Manuel Rapallo in Washington, D.C., our thanks to you and our thanks to Mohammed Val in Tehran as well. Israelis are assessing the damage after another wave of Iranian missile strikes. The attacks hit several locations, including the city of Tel Aviv. Many were intercepted, but falling shrapnel and debris caused fires and injuries to some Israelis. Israeli military spokesperson Efi Defren says the military operation is continuing in Iran until its objective is achieved. He also added that it wasn't the army's policy to overthrow the Iranian regime.
We have an orderly, well-planned combat strategy. We have thousands more targets in Iran, and we generate additional targets every day. The regime is already weakened, and we continue to weaken it more and more each day. As a military, we do not have the goal of toppling a regime. We do not overthrow regimes. We do, however, create the conditions and undermine it so that over time, the Iranian people will take their fate into their own hands and reclaim this country, which has been taken hostage by this terror regime.
Rory Challens is live with the latest updates on Israel from Jordan's capital, Amman. So, Rory, what else are Israeli officials saying about the attacks, not only that are coming from Iran, but also the fight against Hezbollah that's happening in southern Lebanon right now?
Well, Iran is certainly still firing through Sunday. There were several waves of missiles that came in, at least 4 injuries reported in the Tel Aviv suburbs and the wider central Israel region. But undeniably, the launch rate has declined considerably since day one of the conflict by 90%. And the Israelis are saying that up to 70% of Iranian missile launchers have now been destroyed. Now, this conflict has taken on aspects of an attritional war. Iran is clearly rationing its missiles. It's using some bigger missiles for effect and cluster munitions to try to stress Israeli air defense. Israel insists that it's not running out of interceptors for its air defense, as has been reported, and yet it's, at the weekend, passed emergency classified defense procurement spending and has dispatched a senior defense chief to Washington to talk weapons procurement. So there are no signs really of ceasefire talks at the moment. Israel is saying that it can go on. It has plans for another at least 3 weeks of strikes against Iran. That would take it through Passover and beyond. But looking at Lebanon, that's where the trajectory gets a little longer term still. Hezbollah is launching upwards of 30 attack waves every day. Israel is calling up thousands of reserves and edging into southern Lebanon with plans to push forward right up to the Litani River. That would be as far as it's gone since 2006. There are, I think, moves towards some sort of direct peace negotiations between Israel and Lebanon, but those haven't been solidified yet. And of course, Hezbollah would resist any unilateral efforts to disarm it.
Rory Challens live for us in Amman. Thank you, Rory. Israel's military is reinforcing its presence along the Lebanese border. Tanks have been repositioning as Israeli media report a ground offensive is being considered. Lebanon's government has expressed a desire to hold direct talks with the Israeli government, but Foreign Minister Gideon Saar denies any meeting is happening. Heidi Pett is live for us from Beirut for more on this story. So, Heidi, there have been multiple attacks along that border today, including reports that peacekeepers were fired on. What can you tell us about those?
Yes, UNIFIL, which is the peacekeeping force that's been stationed in southern Lebanon for a long time now, decades in fact, issued a statement this afternoon saying that their forces had come under fire by what they termed non-state armed groups. So we have to assume that that is a reference to Hezbollah at 3 locations. So they've got bases throughout southern Lebanon. They regularly undertake patrols outside of those bases. And they say that 3 of those patrols were fired on them. 2 of them participated in an exchange of fire, so they shot back in what they said was self-defense and then went on with their business and completed their patrols. Now, they've said that no peacekeepers were injured in that particular incident, This, of course, is not the first time that peacekeepers have come under fire in southern Lebanon, but it is more usually actually that they come under fire from Israeli positions. We saw that just last week. 3 peacekeepers were injured from the Ghanaian battalion when the Israeli forces in the area opened fire on them. Now, UNIFIL says that it is conducting an investigation at the moment into whether that was indeed deliberate. But the bigger picture across the country today is, of course, there have been a number of Israeli airstrikes, a couple in the Bekaa Valley in the east, but once again, mostly concentrated in the south of the country and those areas closer towards the Israeli border. And there has been a great deal of fire concentrated on the town of Hiam, which is quite a strategic hilltop town. The Israeli ground forces have been making a number of attempts to advance into and take control of that town. Hezbollah has issued statements on a number of occasions over the last week saying that they've engaged directly with the Israelis on the ground there. And the advance does seem to be continuing, but the concentration of airstrikes there in the last 24 to 48 hours indicates that the Israelis have not yet got full control of that town, and they are still attempting to strike on Hezbollah forces on the ground who do seem to be still putting up some resistance.
All right, Heidi Pett, live for us in Beirut. Heidi, thank you. A former U.S. military base in the Iraqi capital has been attacked. Authorities say Victory Base, which is within the perimeter of Baghdad International Airport, was targeted by 5 missiles and 3 drones on Sunday. One of the attacks sparked a large fire and wounded several people, including airport staff and a security officer. Armed groups in Iraq that are linked to Iran have released videos to say their recent attacks on U.S. targets. The pictures from the Iraqi Hezbollah brigades come from cameras mounted on drones. They appear to show low-altitude strikes on the U.S. Victory military base near Baghdad Airport on Saturday. Malik Traina is live for us here in Doha. Malik, can you give us an update on the strikes and the warnings that have been seen around the Gulf today?
Well, it's for the last couple of days, it's been quite busy with attacks coming from Iran. Today, I don't want to say it's been slow, but it's been slower than previous days. Let's just go and read out the list. Here in Qatar, the Defense Ministry said a number of drones were intercepted. In Bahrain, 8 drones were intercepted in the last 24 hours. In the UAE, 6 drones and 4 ballistic missiles. In Kuwait, 14 drones. 2 were intercepted in an army base, which the debris led to the injury of 3 servicemen. Also, they announced that 3 drones hit the international airport and the radar was damaged. Although we have to say and note that Iran said they weren't responsible for that attack. In Saudi Arabia, approximately 15 drones in the last 24 hours. Earlier today, we saw a statement from the GCC as well as the United Kingdom condemning these attacks from Iran. It's interesting that the UK was also in that statement, and that's because over the last couple of days, the British have been helping defend various Gulf countries. The British Ministry of Defense says overnight, Typhoon and F-35 jets supported by Voyager air-to-air refueling have flown sorties in defense of British interests and allies across Qatar, Cyprus, the UAE, Jordan, and Bahrain. Earlier today, we saw the Iranian ambassador to Saudi Arabia talking about, that they're going to be reviewing their relationships with the Gulf. He said, "We are neighbors and we cannot do without each other. We will need a serious review." Just a couple of days ago, the Qatari spokesman for the foreign ministry, he said that we've been neighbors, for a millennium before these tensions, before this war started, and we will be afterwards. But the Iranians will need the Gulf at some point to help in the eventual or the hopeful eventual negotiations with the U.S. And according to him, these attacks on the Gulf aren't really helping their case.
Malik Traina, live for us here in Doha.